Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Meg Postal and I'm a Director of Risk and Policy Analysts, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, which is introducing the Aerospace and Defense Chromates Reauthorization Consortium, in short the ADCR. Today's webinar aims to provide an introduction to the ADCR for those who may not be familiar with it yet, but most importantly, it's a follow-up to our successful launch meeting that was held in Brussels on the 20th of September. Following that meeting, the consortium agreement was sent to participants, and in recent weeks, we have welcomed new members into the consortium. At the same time, we are receiving requests from companies asking us to explain how the consortium will operate and what the benefits of membership are. In this webinar, we've allocated time for you to ask us any questions you may have. Can I have the next slide, please? So the aims of the webinar are to provide an overview of the consortium, to briefly present the team that will manage the consortium and deliver the technical services, explain the benefits of participating in the consortium, and allow those interested in joining to ask questions and seek clarification. Today, our panel includes experts from RPA and Field Fisher, as well as the ADCR's chairman, Steve George. So the presentation will last for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then the floor will be open for you to ask questions. We aim to complete the webinar in about 45 minutes, but a bit additional time can be allocated if necessary. Additional webinars will be held, so please visit the ADCR website if you wish to know more. You will also be able to submit your questions using the chat function of the webinar software. Your questions will be sent to the panelists, and an answer will be provided by a relevant expert. We hope to be able to answer as many questions as possible. If we run out of time, or if we're not able to provide an answer on the spot, we can follow up with you afterwards if you email us on the email address shown on your screen during the webinar. Finally, in our interactions today, we should all be mindful of the need to observe competition law. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the next slide, please. The mission of the ADCR is to deliver a sector-specific response to the authorization challenges which are uniquely faced by the aerospace and defense sector. It's worth noting that this is the first sector-specific consortium to be initiated for authorization purposes and is intended to address all chromate compound authorization requirements in the EU and the UK for the sector. More specifically, the ADCR aims to resubmit authorizations for the A&D uses of chromate compounds where substitution with feasible and less hazardous alternatives cannot be achieved by the end of the review periods granted or expected to be granted to the first set of authorizations. A key area of ADCR's authorization activities will be to address the challenges arising from the scrutiny that previous applications or authorizations received. The review of those past applications by the regulators has led them to propose use conditions which not all relevant actors in the A&D supply chain are able to show they meet. In those cases, better targeted applications may need to be submitted. Another major issue that ADCR addresses is the security of supply. The ADCR is an extensive communication with potential applicants and is attracting numerous upstream applicants with the aim of building supply continuity and certainty into the supply chain for the chromates that the sector really relies upon. By taking a sector-specific approach, the ADCR will ensure that the unique characteristics and requirements of the sector are placed front and center of the argumentation put forward to the regulators without any unnecessary distractions from other sectors where the uses of chromates may be perceived to be far less critical than those of aerospace and defense. Finally, the ADCR aims to address previous imbalances between costs and benefits across the members, as was experienced in a number of the previous consortia. It has been set up so that end users will pay for dossier preparation and application fee costs. Dossier preparation costs will be use-specific and take into account the number of ADCR members applying for that use. Upstream applicants can be non-paying members, but may only join if one or more end user members support or supports the associated downstream uses. In addition, there is a membership cost differential between large and SME end user members, and this is in favor of SMEs. Okay, next slide, please. The ADCR aims to cover exclusively the aerospace, defense, and derivative uses of the chromates of interest. Derivatives are civilian applications of aerospace components and equipment and also include marine propulsion or power generation using products originally designed for aerospace or defense use. Non-aerospace and non-defense uses might be considered, but this will be on a case-by-case basis. Our focus will initially be on the chromates currently on the authorization list. However, this special consortium is expected to run for several years. So if in that period, additional chromium compounds relevant to the A&D industry are added to the authorization list, they will be addressed in our work, subject to approval by the consortium steering committee. In terms of substance use combinations, the starting point is the uses applied for by the 3 original consortia. All aerospace and defense uses covered by those consortia that are still required by the A&D sector will be covered. We have also started a survey of relevant substance use combinations to establish which of the already applied for uses are still of relevance to the A&D sector and whether any new uses need to be covered. Next slide, please. On the other hand, lessons learned from the first round of chromate authorization applications will guide the overall strategy to making these applications and the level of detail within the individual applications. We are familiar with the authority's views on the shortcomings of the previous applications, and we are committed to addressing these to the degree possible, and we want to address all of the criticisms that were made by ECHA committees and the regulators on the original applications. Some uses will need to be more narrowly defined to address the criticisms made by the ECHA committees and the conditions imposed by the European Commission on the granted authorizations. The narrowing of the scope of some uses will also help to better target the analysis, which will in turn increase the chance of a good application outcome. The challenge in this narrowing of scope will be A, to retain traceability to the original parent authorizations so that users will continue to be covered until the new authorizations are granted, and B, to ensure synergies and economies of scale are maximized to the degree possible. And this is an area that we're really working on right now to try and make sure that everything is done as cost efficiently as possible. Finally, as already mentioned, UK REACH authorizations will also be within scope, if required, in addition to EU REACH. So we're following Brexit developments closely, and if urgent action is required, for example, if the original applications need to be resubmitted, then this will be facilitated as a matter of priority. For those of you who are located outside the EU, the fact that you are following the webinar today means that you are most probably aware of the challenges lying ahead of you. Non-EU companies should not underestimate the potential for supply chain disruption as a result of impacts on your EU-based suppliers, your formulators, or your EU-based customers. Again, your membership in the ADCR Consortium will help you control those risks by pooling resources and sharing the costs of reauthorization. We would also hope that wherever you're located, you will convey this message to all in your supply chain who may be impacted. That includes suppliers and customers, and to all those in your industry associations who are also A&D sector stakeholders. Next slide, please. For those unfamiliar with the consultants supporting the ADCR, the team is led by risk and policy analysts in the UK who, in collaboration with their sister company RPA Europe based in Italy, will have overall responsibility and will prepare the analysis of alternatives and the socioeconomic assessment documents. RPA, we, are one of the leading and most successful REACH authorization consultants. In addition, over the past 4 years, we've developed a good understanding of the aims and requirements of the A&D sector through our working relationship with the International Aerospace Environment Group. We will be supported by the German consultancy FOBIG, FOBIG has prepared many successful chemical safety reports, including CSRs for several chromates applications already submitted, and they have been positively received by ECHA's Risk Assessment Committee. And in all cases, they have resulted in long review periods being granted by the European Commission to those authorization applications. We're also supported by the French branch of Bureau Veritas, who are participating in the development of the analysis of alternatives and will provide support on the chemical safety analysis. Their support division of their aerospace services based in Toulouse will also provide some specialized services to the clients and help us in terms of that analysis of alternatives work. Finally, the law firm Field Fisher is responsible for consortium and finance management and is tasked with offering legal advice and upholding competition law in all of ADCR's dealings. Field Fisher obviously has extensive experience in setting up and managing REACH consortia. Next slide, please. Okay, so what types of companies are joining the ADCR? Well, broadly, all companies principally engage in carrying out the design, development, manufacture, maintenance, modification, overhaul, repair, or support of civil or military aerospace and defense equipment, systems, or structures, plus any derivative uses are eligible for membership and are inquiring now about membership. The A&D companies who are joining include those who need an authorization for their own continued use of chromates and their formulations, but also those companies that are suppliers to the end users of these substances. Membership is open to organizations that are involved in the manufacturing or import or use of the substances and their mixtures, or any company that designs or maintains aerospace and defense articles containing or made with the chromates. Essentially, therefore, all companies that could potentially be impacted by the use of chromates in the A&D supply chain are eligible for being members, and we have inquiries from this full supply chain. Membership is also open to only representatives of non-EEA companies meeting the membership criteria. Next slide, please. Okay, the effective date of the consortium, which is the date when the consortium agreement formally came into being, is the 20th of September 2019. Any company joining in the first 3 months after the 20th of September, in other words, before the 20th of December 2019, is considered a founding member. Being a founding member comes with an important benefit. Those joining after the 20th of December 2019 will be classified as late joining members. This means they will also have to pay a late membership fee, which will be based on the costs incurred until the date of joining, plus an additional 30% of the common consortium costs and 30% of any specific substance use costs incurred up to the date of joining. At any time, the ADCR Steering Committee may decide by a qualified majority to reopen the membership of the consortium for a period of 3 months to allow additional companies to join as late joining members. For those who decide not to join the ADCR, ultimately, you may obtain a letter of access. In other words, you may pay for obtaining the analysis generated by the consortium. Next slide, please. Okay, so once your company or legal entity decides to join the ADCR, you'll have to decide which membership category applies to you and inform us accordingly. There are currently 4 different categories. Categories 1 and 2 are aerospace and defense companies, which are either large or small in terms of turnovers and size of workforce. And you can see, and as you can see on the slide, they have different cost shares and different voting rights. It has been a conscious decision to make the cost sharing such that SMEs are paying only 25% of the large companies' contributions, but that they have 50% of the large companies' voting rights. The aim is to reflect the difference abilities that companies who are SMEs have from the larger companies, and the ability to bear the costs, but also we're trying to make sure that membership is attractive to SMEs so that we can benefit the entire supply chain. When splitting the cost of preparation and submission of a specific application among the ADCR members who have an interest in that application, cost shares of all members will be aggregated, and the cost of the application will be divided by the sum of the cost shares to calculate the price of each cost share. So each company will then pay either one cost share if it's a SME or 4 times the cost share if it's a large company. On the other hand, voting will be taking place on several occasions. For example, in the case of deciding which substance use combinations will be covered by ADCR, deciding on reopening the late membership of the consortium, or deciding on accepting late joining members after a closing date. SME companies will have 1 vote, and large companies will have 2 votes whenever a vote needs to be held. Categories 3 and 4 are for upstream companies, with Category 3 representing applicants, i.e. companies that will submit the reauthorization applications to ECHA, while Category 4 is for manufacturers and formulators who are not applicants. For both these categories, members of the consortium may choose to be non-paying members, but then they also have no voting rights. Category 3 and 4 members must be linked to at least one category or Category 2 member of the consortium. Next slide, please. I'd also like to say, before I go on to the types of costs, that we are currently reviewing the different category options with the aim of ensuring that they best meet the needs of all the relevant A&D organizations wishing to join the consortium, and additional membership categories are very likely to be introduced. There will soon be a further communication about this to all of those companies that have expressed an interest in joining the consortium, and also to other types of organizations that have expressed an interest, such as ministries of defense. So we are looking at this to try and make sure that we can find a way of bringing everyone on board. Okay, so in terms of the types of costs, for paying members of the ADCR, 2 types of costs will arise: common costs and specific substance use group costs for the preparation of the respective applications for authorization. Common costs include administrative expenses incurred by the management of the consortium, acquisition of rights to existing studies as approved in advance by the steering committee, and costs for new data to be jointly developed, for example, the costs of undertaking new monitoring activities. Substance use group costs, on the other hand, will include costs associated with preparing and submitting the applications for authorization and any related post-submission costs. The sharing of these costs will be based on the number of members in each substance use group and their company size. At present, upon joining the consortium, each paying member will be asked to make an initial contribution, which is typically referred to as a cash call. This is equal to 12,500 euros for a SME and 4 times that, i.e. 50,000 euros for a large company. This amount will be placed into an escrow account and remains the ownership of the paying member, and will be used for paying invoices from the technical consultants and the consortium manager as the consortium work progresses. So there will be full transparency over the financials at all time. Field Fisher will manage this, and they will be able to answer anyone's questions as the consortium work progresses to let you know how the financial situation is. The amount can be seen as an advance payment, so this cash call can be seen as an advance payment for costs to be incurred as part of the application process. Existing ADCR members have been discussing the approach to costs in recent weeks. Joining early helps a company become party to these strategic discussions early on, and it's appreciated that beyond the initial cash call, it is not currently possible to provide a firm indication of future costs. Why is this? Well, this is because each member's costs will vary depending upon how many uses they want to apply for and how many other members are also interested in applying for each relevant substance use combination. So right now, in the coming weeks, We are looking into options for clarifying the pricing approach, particularly for SMEs. So this is a priority piece of work that we're undertaking as the technical consultants and discussing with the current consortium managers. In that respect, any comments or suggestions as to the kind of clarity that you may require before joining as part of making that decision would be welcome, and we'll be sure to try and feed back to you. Next slide, please. Okay. Are there any questions? Hopefully people have gained some understanding of the mission of the ADCR and the types of membership that are possible. So we're now open to any questions that you may have or any comments that you would like to submit. I think while we wait for questions to come through, I would like to hand over to Steve George if possible, because I know that Steve, as the chair of the ADCR, would just like to briefly say how important he thinks this is.
Thank you, Meg, and great introduction and great presentation. We know in this industry that substitution of all existing uses of chromates is a huge challenge and is unlikely to be successful 100% across the board for the review periods of the existing consortia. Therefore, reauthorization, or if you like, review reports will be required, whether we like it or not. We have to recognize the difficulties with the first round of authorizations. This isn't a matter of blame. The way the authorizations were approached were very much in line with what was intended at the time by the writers of the legislation. But what happened was that the authorization use cases were broad, which meant many downstream users felt confident they did not need to participate in order to be covered. That left gaps in the data, which created uncertainties for the committees. So it is clear that going forward, we need to make the use cases less broad. This gives an incentive for end users to participate, but it creates a commercial problem for upstream applicants because those companies have a less of an economic interest in the chemical in comparison to the end users and the OEMs. So this consortium has been constructed to deal with the structural issues raised by the authorities, the concerns raised by NGOs and civil society, as well as the member states, and also with a sensitivity to the commercial realities that the economic interest in a chemical is different if you're a chemical producer, if you're a formulator, if you're an end user, or if you are an OEM. So we've tried to address all those in a coherent design of consortium which recognizes all those, which brings about essentially a sector-specific authorization construct, which we hope to be fully workable, and which we hope the formulators will be happy to be part of, because ultimately formulators and upstream applicants do not need to pay because the economic interest is with the downstream users. It is crucial that downstream users engage, because the definition of use and the conditions of use coming with these authorization decisions are far more detailed than anyone anticipated 5-6 years ago. Therefore, if a use covers, for example, spraying of a particular chromate, whether it is in a booth or it is in an open air situation, are very different. And it may be that the conditions of use covers one but not the other. So everyone needs to engage to make sure their specific conditions of use are indeed within the scope of the use applied for. And that is another lesson from the first time round. We hope that helps explain some of the structural differences. And please ask any questions at this point in order to develop any of those themes further. Thank you, Meg. I'll pass back to you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I just want to reconfirm something that I said earlier before I hand over to Panos, who is going to go through some of the questions we've received. If you're interested in joining the ADCR, please get in touch with us with any questions that you have. And if you really would like us to try and give you an indication of what the costs might be for your specific company, then if you give us an indication of the substance use combinations that you're interested in defending, we'll be able to generate some very rough indicative authorization costs for you. And that can help you. It can help you going back to your senior manager or whatever to try and provide them with the information they need in order to make a decision. Okay, on that basis, I'm going to hand over to Panos, who is going to indicate some of the questions that we've had and then try and answer those with help from the other panelists if he needs it. Okay, Panos, over to you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well. The first question we have received is how many members are there in the ADCR Consortium at present, and which supply chain levels are represented in the consortium? There are currently approximately 10 members in the ADCR, while a number of additional companies have confirmed their intention to join imminently. At present, the membership includes OEMs and formulators who will be acting as applicants. Another question we have received is, in the first round of applications, the manufacturers and formulators of chemicals containing chromates have been the applicants for authorization. Will they have a role in the consortium and the work towards renewal of the ADCR applications? My answer here will repeat some information we have already presented. Manufacturers, importers, and formulators will have important roles and are welcome to join the consortium. Membership categories 3 and 4 are the relevant ones for this group of stakeholders. A manufacturer, importer, or formulator may be an applicant and thus fall under category 3 and may elect to be a paying and voting or a non-paying and non-voting member. A manufacturer or importer, however, may not wish to be an applicant but still wish to participate in the ADCR application process. In that case, membership category 4 will apply, again with the option of being a paying or a non-paying member. The cost of applications, including the cost of applying for the formulation use, will be covered by the paying members of the relevant substance use group. Thus, unlike the initial applications for authorization, the cost will not be borne by the applicants alone. The advantage of the structure of the ADCR is that all those companies with a vested interest in continued use of the chromates will be actively involved and contribute to the success of the authorization process. A third question we have received: what are the costs to be paid in 2019, if any, in case of joining as a founding member? Again, we have touched upon this earlier. Assuming a company joins the consortium before the 20th of December and is a paying member, the cost of 2019 will be initial non-refundable pre-funding cash call of 12.5 thousand euros per cost share allocation. This is intended to cover the cost of the scoping phase that we are currently undertaking. All cash call letters and invoices are due for payment within 60 days of receipt. In practical terms, what this means? It means that for an SME, a cash call for 12,500 euros will be issued, and for a large company, a cash call for 4 times that amount, i.e. 50,000 euros, will have to be paid by early 2020. Another question we have received is, what would be the cost for each company and each applied for use? Well, this is a fair question, but also, as you can appreciate, a question to which no specific answer can be provided at the moment. Firstly, the only way of ensuring that any one substance use combination is covered by the future work of the consortium is to join the consortium and make sure that this use is included into our work. Secondly, the cost of each application will depend on a number of objective criteria, such as how complex the supply chain is, how much information is already known from previous applications, how many realistic alternatives need to be assessed, and so forth. Those who participate in the launch meeting on the 20th of September will remember that we have been able to make estimates of costs for applications of different complexity. These estimates are based on costs that would apply for applications made in isolation. However, grouping of uses will be possible and economies of scale will be achievable, bringing further cost synergies and efficiencies. Again, without companies actually joining the consortium and declaring which substance use combinations they wish to defend, it is not possible to promptly identify such possibilities. Thirdly, costs for each application will be shared by the members of the relevant substance use group. The more members in each group, the lower the cost for each member. For this reason, it is important that all consortium members encourage companies along their supply chains to join and support specific uses. This will ensure that everyone's needs are properly taken into consideration and reflected in the application, and it will also reduce the cost per company within that group. Because we appreciate that senior management in your companies may wish to have better visibility of the cost at the outset, the existing ADCR members are currently discussing, as Meg mentioned, how to make the pricing structure more predictable, particularly for SMEs. Decisions on this are expected in the coming weeks. And if you wish to take part in these discussions and be part of the decision-making process, of course, now it is the time for you to join. However, if you are not yet in a position to become a member, your thoughts and ideas on that issue would be welcome. So please feel free to email us the address that we have provided earlier with your own suggestions. Another question we have received is there any mechanism for assessing if applications for separate uses are required or if related uses can be combined into one? I think I touched upon a little bit earlier on that. The key tool for establishing synergies is a questionnaire that has been developed to support the scoping phase, which we are currently in. Every new member will be asked to provide details of the substance use combinations they wish to defend, and the current members have already provided this data. This will help us identify overlaps in terms of uses, for example, which are essentially the same but may involve more than one substance, uses which are closely linked together, i.e. they occur at the same location in quick succession as part of a wider process and thus can be considered in their entirety. To ensure that these synergies are identified promptly and are taken into account in developing our future action plans, it is important again that new members join as soon as possible and respond to the scoping questionnaire in full. A sixth question we have received is, do the OEM companies that coordinate the setting up of the consortium pay lower fees than newer members? The answer is no. The so-called pre-consortium members originally committed to contribute 20,000 euros each towards the cost of setting up the consortium and undertaking a preliminary scoping phase. However, as soon as the consortium agreement came into force on 20th of September, each one of these large companies was sent an additional cash call for 30,000 euros, so that the total financial contribution upon joining is 50,000 euros for each company, the same as the initial financial contribution for any large company joining the consortium. A further question we have received is, we think that joining the ADCR is the right thing for our company, but we cannot see why we should be joining now, since we tend to cover uses with a later reauthorization deadline. We are also waiting for the results of the initial applications. Would it not be premature to join now and pay the joining fee now? Well, there are benefits to joining the consortium now, even if a use is to be worked on at a later stage. Such benefits include, if you sign the consortium agreement by the 20th of December 2019, you will be counted as a founding member rather than a late joining member. Late joining members will, according to the consortium agreement, pay an additional late membership fee. It is therefore more cost-effective to join as a founder member early on. If you join early as a founding member, you will also be able to keep abreast of developments from early on, and you will have the opportunity to participate in decision-making from the outset. Finally, if your company wishes to defend a use which has not been adequately covered by the previous applications for authorization, this gap would need to be given priority, and work on it should start very promptly. The only way to manage this business risk is to join the ADCR and declare such uses early on. A further question we have received is, we are located outside the EEA, and our company does not use chromates in the EEA at all. However, companies along our supply chain, upstream or downstream, do use chromates within the EEA. Does this mean that those other companies are eligible for joining the consortium, but we are not? No. The location of your company is not relevant in terms of membership eligibility. As long as you are in an aerospace or defense company, you may join. Indeed, if your company relies on the continued use of chromates by other companies in your upstream supply chain, you have a very strong incentive to join, and we would really encourage you to invite your suppliers and customers to also join to ensure full coverage of the entire supply chain. And finally, from my side, at this point, another question we had received is, our supply chain includes public bodies such as Ministries of Defense. Are such organizations eligible for ADCR membership? Should we encourage them to join? Well, Ministries of Defense are welcome to join the consortium, and we in fact encourage ministries to join as they will hold important data which are relevant to the applications. Membership categories 1 and 2 incorporate such potential members, although it is most likely that the Ministry of Defense will be an SME, therefore a category 2 member, rather than it will be probably a large organization. On the other hand, we do recognize that the requirements of Ministries of Defense are quite unique, and we are prepared to accommodate this. We appreciate that the Ministry of Defense may not wish to become a Category 1 member. Similarly, an ordinary downstream user, a user other than the Ministry of Defense, may wish to support the ADCR with data, but may be reluctant to engage as a full member of the consortium. The ADCR is currently reviewing the membership categories to facilitate the participation of stakeholders who could offer vital support to the success of the consortium, but do not currently match the profile of current membership categories. I'm not sure if we have any more questions coming from the participants. I will pass on the floor to Steve George. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Panos. I just want to reinforce a point in terms of why another reason to start early is that we should not underestimate the work that needs to be done to file review reports. Given the concerns raised by the authorities regarding the authorizations the first time round, we know we have to approach it differently to get as much engagement from the downstream user base as possible. And that means the way we construct the data set, etc., has to be done afresh. So waiting just to see, okay, we want the initial authorizations to be issued first before we start. Well, the clock is ticking. We know there's a lot of work to do, so we have to recognize this in our planning, and therefore it is important to start as soon as possible. So we encourage people to join because of that, if nothing else.
Thank you very much, Steve. I think I would also like to add that we have sent out these substance use matrices to people who expressed an interest. We took those back in. They indicate a potentially large number or relatively large number of substance use combinations which may or may not need to be authorized as new uses and may need to be treated as a priority. We're about to try and refine the information that we have on those to make sure we really understand whether or not they should be called new uses or would be classed by new uses as ECHA. But what that indicates to us is that there really is a need for some of the detailed work to be starting as soon as possible. So if you're one of those people who has identified that you may have a use that falls outside of the current system, then set of authorizations, then we would say you really do need to get in touch with us and talk with us further. Okay. I think we have gone through all of the questions that have arisen. I'll give another minute or so just in case somebody does have a question. And let's see if anything comes through on the chat. No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating in the webinar today. Please get in touch with us if you have any other questions. We're more than happy to respond to emails or indeed to speak to you over the phone or if need be, try and meet with you in person to go through any issues that you may have. Thank you very much, and I'll end the webinar now. Thank you also to the panelists.
Thank you.